Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We hope you're doing well. We're so excited to have you join us for our webinar, How User Research Can Improve Digital Experiences in Pharma and Healthcare. My name is Lynette, and I'm part of the team here at AnswerLab. And before we start, I'd like to mention a few things. If you have any questions you'd like to submit to our presenter today, you can do so via the chat box at the bottom of your screen. And if we have time, we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the discussion or follow up with a response. Additionally, this webinar is being recorded, so you'll all receive a recording via email after this event in case you'd like to review some of the information provided today. We're going to do our best to keep this to 45 minutes so you can stay on track for the rest of your day. Now, for those of you that aren't too familiar with AnswerLab, we are a full-service UX research company. We provide enterprise user experience research services that deliver user insights at scale across every stage of product development. We leverage qualitative and quantitative UX research to get companies to the firsthand insights that shape better products and better results at the scale and speed business demands. Today's discussion will be led by Sandra Sweat, UX strategist here at AnswerLab. Take it away, Sandra.
Thanks, Lynette. Hi, as Lynette said, I am Sandra Sweat. I'm a UX strategist here at AnswerLab. What that means is I think a lot about how to get research done and help our clients plan out the best approach to answer their business questions and achieve their research goals. Prior to UX research, I worked at the bedside as a registered nurse in a variety of settings: hematology, oncology, perioperative services, long-term care. And during that experience, I saw the need for better digital experiences that could support those interacting with the healthcare system. So that's where my passion ended up being. So I went back to school, learned about UX design and research, and then I was lucky enough to be able to jump straight into the healthcare field. I worked in-house, primarily at healthcare-focused companies, and then at AnswerLab as a senior UX researcher prior to being a strategist here. And I've had the opportunity to teach along a healthcare designer for undergraduate courses in UX research in healthcare. So I'm really excited about today's presentation. So a little bit about what we're going to cover today. I'm excited about approaching research with digital experiences in healthcare and pharma. And I'd like to talk about the challenges, overcoming those challenges with different approaches to research, talking through a case study from the planning side of research through to the outcome, and finally sharing some resources to get started. So I like to put this in context with what I mean when I say digital experience or digital resources, user experience. I'm talking about learning about people's needs and wants when it comes to a system or digital products, and how that product does or does not meet those expectations and needs. First things first, for those of you who don't know us, AnswerLab's a full service UX research company, as Lynette talked about. Our mission is to help create experiences people love, and we know that too often underrepresented groups don't have a great digital experience, and we're on a mission to change that. So what I'd like to do is start off with questions that we get in the healthcare space. So there's a lot of them we've answered recently. It comes from anything starting with scheduling, how physicians interact with digital resources, the ISA's visual display, and is it actually meeting users' needs, developing journey maps, diving into usability with front office staff, and tackling the challenges in the healthcare setting generally. But in my experience, answering these types of questions comes with its own unique challenges due to how healthcare just works. The mental models of not only your participants, but also internal stakeholders, the processes you go through, and so much more. Often the first challenge can be when to even get started with research, particularly when your digital experiences are already created or there's only updates that you can make. So ideally, the best time to do research is at the beginning of a project and continuously thereafter. But as you can see in this particular visual, research is an iterative, ongoing process. So if you jump in at a different point in time, it's going to be okay. So when is the best time to do research? There's a bunch of times that you can do research and get that cycle started. You can be at the very beginning when you first have ideas, but you can also do when you're trying to prioritize a feature, or you're trying to answer questions or fill a gap in information in your organization. So if you're just starting out, starting small and building a case for research is a great way to go, but it really depends on your organization's experience with research, the point in development process, your budget, and other factors. One of the biggest challenges that I've seen when it comes to research in healthcare and pharma is talking to the right people, because there's a lot of nuance when it comes to what people do in the healthcare field. While a doctor is responsible for a lot of different things, there's also many people that you may never encounter when you're using the healthcare system who make things work, who may be using your digital experiences on a day-to-day basis. So I've put on this slide multiple user groups and some of the characteristics I'd like to talk through about who these people are. So at the very top, we've got the people you know and love, the healthcare providers. These can be doctors, nurse practitioners, physicians' assistants. They all are responsible for the medical decisions they make. They all have prescriptive authority of different types. For instance, a nurse practitioner and a physician's assistant, depending on the state they're in, may have the ability to independently prescribe medications to their patients, meaning they have full authority over the decisions they make. In other states, sometimes they have to have a cosign with a physician. Allied health professionals and support staff work in healthcare. I've seen more and more people talking to these particular roles. These all have certifications, licensures. These can be registered nurses, social workers, dietitians, people who assist patients, so nurse navigators who might work at an insurance company or in-house at a health system, and also people who support access to care, so office managers, advocates, biologic coordinators, anybody who helps the patient reach their goals and make sure that the office is running well. They all may be using your digital experiences in one way or the other. The other big group is non-healthcare professionals. I say that because it's not just patients, but it's also caregivers and other people who may be encountering the health system and helping others who don't have official licensure, certification, or education. The really things they're looking for is they might have issues managing and getting access to care and responsible for navigating health systems. So for all these groups, there can be special considerations for conducting research. For patients, it might just be the awareness of stigma on a condition, keeping video off during sessions, and additional PII safeguards. For physicians, HCPs, there may be rules at your organization based on when you can talk to them, how often you can talk to them, and just knowing that helps you step into research with all the information you need. There's also the development environment. So healthcare and pharma is a very special development environment. One thing that I always like to reflect back on is the deformation professional effect. So when you're in healthcare, and this happened to me, is you're in it for a few months and you have a really big learning curve, and suddenly you know a lot more than everybody else does, particularly those people who are using your experiences. So you always have the effect of thinking everybody knows what I know. So that's why it's really important to bring your users into the conversation as frequently as you are able to remind yourself of the assumptions that you're making based on the information and knowledge that they have. The other thing to think about is these development processes take a really long time. Pharmaceutical development processes, their life cycle starts far beyond when the digital experiences start being created. And there's a lot of excitement that builds up throughout that whole cycle, to where that smaller piece, when you're developing the digital experiences and the life cycle that happens after it, you're invested in it in a different way than your users might be. And then there's also a lot of people who have to have their influence over the digital experiences for a variety of reasons, such as design, legal, regulatory, marketing, compliance, all sorts of people who need to contribute to the types of content, the way things are displayed, to make sure that you're delivering an experience that meets some of the constraints and unique constraints that are in healthcare. The other thing to think about is, unfortunately, your experience doesn't live in a vacuum. People don't just do healthcare and then they separate everything else out. They bring with them the expectations of the things that they use on a day-to-day basis. So you have to know what differentiates you from the experiences of your competitors. What are the impacts of making a wrong decision? It's not as easy as being able to return something on Amazon. There are other types of impacts that you have downstream you have to think about. And then also, your information really does have to be trustworthy in a specific way based on the kind of things that you're doing for people. But all that being said, all these challenges, we can overcome them, and I've got some ways that you can do that and think about how to take first steps. So a big thing about UX research in healthcare and pharma is, who are you talking to? You got to think about your audience, who they are, where they are. And if you don't know, desk research is a great way to start. Great resources that are easily available at your fingertips. Universities and community college program websites will tell you a lot about people's roles, expectations for those roles, the kind of education they get, what they need to know to give you a baseline prior to even talking to them. Also, another resource is job postings. What do they say about roles and responsibilities of the people that you want to talk to? That helps with screener development, making sure you're talking to the right people, and you're starting from a different level of understanding. I really love doing research in healthcare because the foundation is set with people. So as you can see up here in healthcare professionals, I've got some information about them. Their licensure and education helps set that foundation because they have to take similar licensure exams. They are a part of accredited programs that have specific things that they teach. So they end up with similar mental models. Sometimes things can change based on their environment that they're in and working in, but ultimately that foundation gives a strong theme, which allows us to have smaller sample sizes. So a sample size of 6, which is typically best practice in UX for segments, you can achieve that without having an N of 30. So you can get started pretty quickly and get research done in a pretty quick amount of time. For non-healthcare professionals, you need to make sure you recruit on specific factors to make sure that you're talking to the right people and getting information that will reflect and give you good feedback to make prioritization. They can be based on specific life experiences. They can be specific therapies that they're taking. It can also be about their health goals. How do they want to get better? What kind of therapies are they open to make sure that there's a good fit between the solution that you're creating and what they're looking for. And if you want to learn about, for instance, a patient on a journey in relation to a biologic, making sure you have ensure a mix of people who have different experiences with their care. Up here, I have insurance type and experience with prior authorization. Some people never see prior authorization because they've got great healthcare coverage, their doctors push everything through and it's magical. And other people have to fight for every medication they're on, specifically biologics. So you want a mix of people to make sure that you cover the range of experiences. This is particularly important where I've seen, for instance, pharmaceutical websites with patient support, is making sure people even understand what patient support is so that they can navigate to it and find the information. If you have someone who's never encountered that and doesn't need it, trying to find it doesn't fit within their mental model. So a quick tip here, people who have experience can give you that valuable information about the pain points and access to care. Versus those who've never had those issues getting medication coverage, it's not going to be as helpful to navigate through the digital experience, which this leads me to inclusivity when doing recruits. So it is a challenge, like I said, to find the right mix of people. Luckily, there is a good answer to this. In healthcare and others, there's a big push towards inclusivity so that you can present experiences across all people who may be using it. According to the NIH, people may experience the same disease differently. Our health is a combination of physical, mental well-being, which is affected by a variety of factors, behavioral, biological, environment, societal policies, and most importantly, our lived experiences. Where this plays into UX research is usually at the beginning when you're deciding who to talk to and who your experience is for and bringing all those factors together. An important piece is when you're writing a screener, making sure you're accounting for specific things so that you can have an inclusive recruit with people who have these different viewpoints. Unfortunately, healthcare is not just one person gets it, everybody has to experience it. So you get to develop and find solutions for a range of people. Inclusive recruits and inclusive research also is really valuable. It helps you gather data that's more accurately representative of your whole user population. You can identify areas that interfere with the user's ability to interact with the system. Discovering early on whether significant, expensive accessibility issues actually exist, providing critical insights that help you innovate your products, not just fixing specific issues, and connecting with people where they are and using their tools and technologies to get a realistic context. This can include assistive devices, but also people who don't have Wi-Fi that's really great, and understanding how that affects how they access specific information and your technologies. And finally, when you're approaching research, it's important to know how your experience fits in the digital ecosystem. I talked about this a little earlier as part of your digital experience doesn't exist in a vacuum. But particularly important in healthcare is understanding the different types of applications that are used on a day-to-day basis. When you do any research with a doctor, they will tell you about their electronic health record ad nauseum. They're in it all the time. And if that experience doesn't somehow integrate in there or is so good that it fulfills a need, they won't go to it. It's part of their life. It revolves around it for medical legal purposes, for documentation, for reflection. It does a lot of things. And then also your experience just competes with other, not just those direct competitors, but also experiential competitors. So the Amazons, Facebooks, Googles of the world, they set the interaction pattern expectations. And UX research can help you understand and learn from those competitors and learn in a smart way. And taking a critical lens when you do conduct research and looking at those experiential competitors is incredibly important, because sometimes interactions aren't appropriate to your audience's mental model when it comes to healthcare applications, pharmaceutical applications, because you have specific constraints that you bring to the table that you've got to work through that those big companies may not have to. Other things you have to think about from legal or regulatory standpoint, but also friction points that you may have to actually introduce to help people stop and think what they're doing. And additionally, when you're here, what is not appropriate? Sometimes you need something that feels more professional versus something that feels more transactional. All right, so the next thing I'd like to do is just talk at a high level about how to approach planning a research study. And after that, I'll work through all of these questions as part of a case study. So first off, collecting your background. So if you're writing a research brief, you think about a couple of core things: your goals, your objectives, and what you'd like to learn at the end of the day. Sometimes it's, what questions do I not have answers to that are preventing me from releasing a product with confidence? Is there something that keeps you up at night? Is there something that could cause your product not to perform as well as you were hoping it would? Is this a one-off project? Is this something big where you're collecting a lot of information up front? Or do you need research on a repeat basis, such as what you would do with an agile workflow? The next thing is thinking really about scope. So where are you in the development process? And I ask that question of our clients all of the time, because that affects the methods that we use to get feedback and answers from your target audience. So do you have a prototype already? Do you have a concept? Do you have a live site? What kinds of things need to be done to get access to these different types of materials? That's all important in these processes, because sometimes you need to get permissions to get access. Sometimes you need to make sure you have your ducks in a row so that when it's time to talk to people, everything's up there and you've got that going smoothly. And then also, are there multiple experiences that need to be tested? Many times when we have a 60-minute session, we may be testing multiple things just because of the nature of our clients' workflows and the development cycles that they're in. And then also, what platforms are you going to be testing on? Mobile, desktop? Do you have a kiosk type of setup that you're going to test? Where do you need to test? Can it be remote? Does it need to be in person? Is contextual, the actual context important as well? Do you need to do a diary study because it needs to be over a longer period of time because of the way people interact with it? So all of these things come together to help inform the method and the best method to use for research. The next thing, we've talked about this a lot, but recruiting, knowing how many segments that you want to talk to. A lot of our clients serve both HCPs, healthcare professionals, and patients. So they'll combine and make sure that they talk to both sides at once so that they can compare and contrast, see what's happening. So knowing exactly who your segments are. Sometimes they'll also do healthcare professionals and then back office staff to see who's really doing the work. Sometimes they have hearsay about the doctors doing something and find out it's actually the office staff. So they stack their deck to make sure that they talk to both groups. Also, sample sizes. There are some organizations that N of 6 is not appropriate because your stakeholders need to see bigger numbers, and that's okay. You'll still see strong themes. You'll just talk to more people. So really understanding the environment you're in. When conducting especially qualitative research is to understand what's going to help make an impact with your study. So while we recommend 6 people as a great starting point, Some organizations need slightly larger sample size to build confidence in their research. And then will the participants be, how are they going to be recruited? Do you have a list? Do you have a panel? Is it by client? Are there restrictions on the list and how you use it? All of these different things to think about. And then finally, timing. Timing is incredibly important, as y'all all may know, when it comes to research, so that you can actually use it and make an impact with it. A big thing about timing for us is thinking about, all right, when do you want to know when to get a deliverable? Do you need it in November? Do you need it as part of something that's happening faster or slower? So once you have that date in mind, you can backcast. And when I say backcast, it's all the things you need to do prior to actually getting a report. So how many days of sessions are you going to be running? How long do you need to write the report? Other considerations, how long will it take to actually recruit the target audience you have? For more niche audiences, that can be 2, 3, 4 weeks or more. Do you need to get legal or regulatory approval through your organization to be able to conduct research, make sure that all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed? So all these things can help you go back to the start date so that you know where your end date is. We do that at AnswerLab when we create our timelines, is understanding how long it'll take to recruit, and then also when do you need that information to make an impact on your digital experience. One other thing I'd like to cover here is the kind of development cycle you're in. So if you're in an agile organization as opposed to waterfall, your developers are working a little bit differently. Sometimes I've seen organizations where a design team works ahead, so you can get research at a different cadence. Sometimes they're working right alongside. A good solution that I've seen here is having regularly scheduled research where you don't have a topic ahead, but you know your sessions will be at a certain time so that you can deliver research results to designers so that they can make the changes that will go into the JIRA tickets ultimately, so that the developers can take stock of those changes. All right, so what I'd like to do next is go through a case study, answering a specific question and how I think through these things to be able to come up with the best methods to conduct the research. So for this case study, question is, what information is most valuable to healthcare practitioners during their day-to-day practice to make decisions? So this was a question that AnswerLab actually answered as part of a study. So this is the high-level question that we had. So what I do first is I think about a couple of different things. The first one is I always think about the stimuli, because that helps me understand where in the process we might be, which informs what kind of methods would be most appropriate. So in this case, our client had a high fidelity prototype, and they also had some content they wanted to test that didn't have a design. When I look at the human-centered design process with this particular graphic, this puts them in the optimization phase. They've already made decisions. They need to test and validate some of those decisions, and then they can iterate on their prototypes, develop, and move on. The next thing I think about is, what does the team actually want to be able to do with the information? I can come up with some really great research and really great recommendations, but if I don't know what you're trying to do with it, it won't make as big of an impact. So in this case, they want to identify usability issues, specifically with the navigation. And then they also wanted to prioritize opportunities for an improved experience. So they also wanted a little bit of a mixed method approach. They wanted some background, they wanted some feedback based on their design decisions, and they needed to make sure that they didn't have any red flags when it came to usability. So this helps me start thinking about the methods. And then the next thing is, who needs to use the experience? This helps with recruiting, figuring out who we're going to talk to, and what would prompt them to visit the sites. So in this case, it was people with specific conditions, so that helps with targeting the right participants. And then a mix of those who do independent research on their health and those who rely on a healthcare team for information. This helps with the different mental models that our patients may be experiencing. But this also tells me we probably have 2 segments, a minimum of 12 people that we'll be talking to. And then the last thing is how the data needs to be presented to your stakeholders. This is a really important thing to make sure that your research lands correctly and you're able to use it. And for this particular client, they needed this research to align with an existing journey map. to contextualize the findings so that the teams that were responsible for different parts of the experience had that shared understanding. They all really loved the journey map of this organization. Everyone knew about it. So being able to connect the findings to those specific points in time was going to help the research make a bigger impact. So when I think about what methods to use, I've got a long list on the right. These are not inclusive of everything that you could do, but it's a pretty good mix of things. So when I think about prototypes with high fidelity, you're already probably at the usability testing phase, which is also what our client wanted to do, and testing navigation. Well, sometimes we do card sorts and tree tests, but at this point, because there's already an existing prototype, all of those things have been decided. Sticking with usability testing and concept testing is the best idea here. Other things that I think about is, are we talking to people? Do we need to do it in context? Do we need to do it, or can we do it one-on-one in an interview? In this case, we didn't need to do a diary study because we didn't need to see people over time. It was point in time, so that's appropriate for a 60-minute session. So what ended up happening here was 3 different methods over the course of 60 minutes that were used. The first one was task assessment and usability. So have issues completing tasks core to those business objectives. The next thing was concept, feedback, and ranking. So they had those content, pieces of content they needed ranked, and understanding what's the top performer based on needs. So that's why I have not only getting feedback, but also ranking highest to lowest, where they were meeting objectives specifically with those, and helping guide and give directional feedback for the team to take next steps. And finally, a content evaluation. So when people evaluate content, having them read it, having them highlight different words that respond to certain things that you're trying to achieve with your content. And also for this one, identifying trustworthy information. So if a participant did not feel it was trustworthy, really digging in while you have them on the line, figuring out what about that content doesn't feel trustworthy. And then also understandable. Could they communicate based on what the content was, what it was trying to tell them? So those were the 3 methods that we recommended and were used in this study. And then finally, our outcome for this one, based on what we did, we were able to rank the effectiveness of the patient journey across various factors. So using that ranking, and learn that the desktop experience was superior to that of mobile. And both opportunities had navigation. So that really helps with what can the designers do next with the information to improve. Where do you prioritize next steps for development to make sure that people don't have those issues moving forward? And then also delivered a task-by-task assessment of patient behaviors to prioritize roadmap and next steps. This was important for our product managers who are part of that team to be able to figure out what were they going to cover next, what could come first, what was already done, and roll forward and make those improvements. So a couple of quick steps for getting started with your own studies. 1, talk to your teams about unanswered questions. Think about questions you don't have an answer to. What keeps them up at night? What might possibly prevent your particular digital experience or a digital product from actually being as successful as you want it to be when it comes to the human-centered design process? What kind of assumptions are people making in your organization about your participants or about how your digital experience works? Next is finding out the last time you tested your digital experience with an audience. When was the last time you pulled in people who were using your products? And if it's been a while, it's a really good time to start with maybe a smaller study, get those people's voices heard. And then also, I really love to recommend this. I learned this from a designer early on when I was first just beginning to be a researcher. I dabbled a bit in design, but when I first went there was always diving into desk research, seeing what kind of books are out there, reading websites, just making a little bit of time on your calendar to do a little bit of digging. 30 minutes a week will help you expand what you know about your participants, what you know about your users exponentially over time. And to do that, one, AnswerLab has some great resources that you can get started with in the healthcare and pharma space. We have challenges in digital healthcare experiences, what HCPs want from pharma and medication websites, as well as what patients want. This is based on a depth of experience from our UX researchers over many, many, many studies and seeing those trends. And then also some others as well. As part of this particular presentation, I dived into a bunch of different resources to remind myself of different things I wanted to talk about. Government websites of different kinds will have a rich variety of information, the NIH, the FDA, as well as journals and medical journals. Like you go to the different medical journals focused at different types of HCPs. So nursing, doctors, dietitians, just to see what they're saying and what's important in that particular field right now. Sometimes the answers to your research questions have already been answered by someone and published. And then also there's a couple of other great resources. I always lean on Nielsen Norman Group. They do a great job of documentation on a variety of topics. And then there's a couple of other books here as well that I lean on. And then gonna open it up for questions at this point. So thanks everybody for going on that journey with me. And Lynette, do we have any questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Sandra. We do. We have a few questions that were pre-submitted by our participants. So first question we have here, what is the best form of collecting patient insights? Are there specific market research initiatives towards end of life cycle management?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So collecting insights, there's a couple of different ways that I could see this through a lens. So one, conducting research, but two, like if you want to collect different insights throughout the process, is thinking about how you're storing your insights over time and how you're communicating them. You don't have to have a really big, expensive tool to be able to pull those all together. You can use a spreadsheet. You can use different types of newsletter formats, but as long as you keep it in one place, that helps you share those over time. And then for the second part of that question, which was towards the end of life cycle management, depending on what you mean by life cycle management, there's a couple different things this could mean. And if you are actually on the call and remember this as your question, feel free to clarify. But towards the end of life cycle, when it comes to perhaps pharmaceuticals, is when you're about to launch. It's if you haven't had a chance to do research up front when it comes to your participant, your audience, it's a good time to at least show them what you've produced from your digital experiences, get some validations and gut checks when it comes to usability. You can run concept testing still at that point, but really be cognizant of the kind of changes that you can make and ask for from your development team so that you can really target those heavy hitters. And then once you do release, you can still do usability testing. You can go back to the beginning of the cycle and do more foundational work so that you can figure out needs and make adjustments as needed.
Wonderful. Thank you for that response. We do have another question here. How do we engage seldom heard and/or reticent users?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And it kind of makes me reflect back on the number of different users that you have. And understanding the reason to why they might not be responding to you is also very important. So things that come to mind, at least for healthcare professionals, is they're very busy. Sometimes you have to schedule sessions across a wide period of the day to make sure that you catch them because they work different types of shifts and schedules. So for instance, as a nurse, I work 12-hour shifts, but I had a few days off during the week. If I worked 8-hour shifts, I might start at 6, I end at around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So afternoon sessions would be possible. So being more flexible about your timing when it comes to sessions so that you can catch them if that is in fact the issue. If it's hard to reach these people, things that we do at AnswerLab is we have a great relationship with a variety of our recruit partners who help us find people. Sometimes you have to do more grassroots to find who you're looking for. So it takes a little bit longer to get to these audiences, but it's well worth it at the end of the day. Other things you can do is if it's a smaller audience, smaller incident size, or really hard to get them, is you can create a panel of people. I've seen this done at a number of organizations I've been at, is making sure that you have a panel that kind of has a few people cycle in and out, but they're passionate. They come, they show up, and you get at least the feedback from them, and you cycle in 1 or 2 people to make sure that you're getting fresh ideas and you're not just developing for N of 1. Other things you can do, like seldom heard users from an inclusivity standpoint, is really thinking about the screeners that you're writing, how to make sure that you get a good mix of people and understanding where people are at. when it comes to participating in research, and being flexible about getting people, maybe extending the amount of time that you have for research. When it comes to socioeconomic factors, your research may not be the most important thing in their lives. So allowing time for rescheduling, allowing time for alternate participants who fit the profile you're looking for, and just remembering that they're living different lives than you are and bringing that to the table. A lot of times in the recruit phase, we learn a lot about people because we see when are they rescheduling, when are they able to work, and then asking the whys behind that really does help us learn about who they are. The other point about conducting research is ensuring them that their information is protected. Sometimes we will have research where we have cameras off, or in more extreme cases, not even recording, so that they can share their thoughts and feel confident about that. In those cases, we usually have some sort of transcription happening, or we reassure them that their information will not be shared, and just remembering those different factors that may be impacting that. And if you have any other follow-up questions about that, what I've said so far, any clarifications, really happy to continue that conversation. But I think those are some thoughts that come top of mind for me for that question.
Thank you for those thoughts, Sandra. So that concludes today's presentation. If no one else has any additional questions or comments, again, thank you to our panelist, Sandra, and thank you all for joining us today. As mentioned, you'll all receive a link to this webinar recording and presentation tech in an upcoming email. If you found this discussion useful or informative, feel free to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and also check out our insights blog at AnswerLab.com for more great content. Thank you again everyone for joining us today, and I hope you have a great day. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.